Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Small Lake City podcast. I really appreciate it. Today's episode is sponsored by Lynny's Inner Therapy. What do I mean by sponsored? Well, it's a bit of a loose term. Lynny Anderson, LCSW, is going to be on today's episode, as I'm sure you've seen. So I thought I'd give her a little plug, a little advertisement, if you will, before her episode. So Lynny has just opened up her own private practice called Lynny's Inner Therapy, where you can go to get mental health services. So go check out her website, lynnysinnertherapy.com, to see if maybe those services could be good for you or a loved one. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the episode today. So, Lynny, to start, I'd like to pay you a compliment. I just think that, there's not very many people in this world that I know of that, like, after years of not talking to each other or seeing each other very much, every once in a while we run across each other at something or send a message via social media or whatever. But for the most part, like, we haven't chatted a lot in the last few years, but I still sort of feel this connection because I think that's the type of person that you are.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I can ditto that comment back to you for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. I, just feel comfortable, and I know that you're an authentic, just straightforward human being, and I really love that about you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. One of the bigger developments that I've recently seen you share on social media is about private practice, of you being a therapist and opening a private practice. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what that process has been like?
Sure. Yeah. I just barely in August opened a private practice called Lynny's Inner Therapy /Lit.
I like it.
Yeah. So I'm just working on that, and it's been a pretty amazing process.
That's cool. I was thinking about just the words private practice, and that might sound weird to a lot of people. Like, I don't even know why we as mental health therapists call it a private practice. I guess because we're practicing therapy privately. I don't know, like, do you any insight on where that came from? Why do we call it private practice?
I mean, I don't know, but I could guess that maybe because of confidentiality, maybe we call it private practice.
Yeah.
And we're practicing social work.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
I don't know why we call it private practice.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
And yeah, I just say that because I think maybe people that are listening to this that aren't as familiar with mental health services and what's out there, they might hear like, oh, she opened a private practice. What does that mean? But yeah, essentially, for those that are kind of wondering, essentially it's Lynny as a therapist. She's just opening her own little small business as a therapist and asking anybody that would like to come and receive therapeutic services to come to her. And just from the get-go, I'd highly recommend that. If you're looking for a therapist, Lynny would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that private practice is a few days a week sort of thing. People can come and talk to you about whatever mental health concern that they have in their life, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So 12 and older is who I work with, and just multiple mental health issues. I kind of do it all.
Okay, I like that. Would you say that there's a specialty to what you do, or a thing that you enjoy working on with folks?
I've been working with adolescents for 13 years, so that's kind of my specialty. But also within that, I've always done family, because a big piece of that is the parents and communication with parents. So, and then on top of that, I've done their parents individually. So a lot of individual adults. So that's kind of what my specialty is. And at the program that I've worked at for a really long time, it's the most defiant youth in Utah. So it's, kids in the court system, foster care kids, reactive attachment. I mean, really just everything and anything.
It takes a big heart to work with youth in general, and then youth with all the challenges that you described. That probably takes a little bit more.
Yeah, I think social work for anybody is is a lot, but the good outweighs the bad always.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's always worth it to engage with people and to connect, form relationships with them, and spend time helping them out. Yeah. It's got to be a little weird, though, to like work with a youth individually and then invite their parents in to work with them individually. But it's also got to be like, okay, I can see why the dynamics are the way that they are after you kind of meet with parents and youth individually. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, everyone has a different perspective and they experience every situation differently. And it's just kind of trying to find like, okay, this is how the parent is experiencing this and this is how the child is, and then trying to communicate that, because ultimately they want to strengthen their relationship. They want to get along. They want to bond more. They just don't know how. And so it's kind of unraveling those pieces and helping them find a way to do that.
Yeah, I like that, because I think it is true that most people that are coming in to see a therapist about some sort of relationship issue, they really do want to improve the relationship. They know that those conflicts or the friction in the relationship is causing them whatever, and so they do want to talk about it and resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you successful, and maybe this is just a selfish question because I also, work with youth and families as well. Are you successful in getting youth and parents, going back and forth, them actually opening up and communicating better together, rather than you having to go back and forth and be like, well, I don't know what sort of confidentiality agreements you share with them, but kind of, I imagine you're a go-between at some level, but you're probably advocating for them to like, oh, can you talk to mom about this and see if you can share that with them? Or can you talk to son or daughter about this and see if you can share that with them, sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even with some of my youth, I'll have them role play, like, okay, they'll agree to tell mom and dad and they want to, but they're scared and they're nervous. So we'll kind of role play how we're going to say it, and we practice. And then I'll also prep the parent, hey, they have something they want to tell you. Can you be open and provide a safe space? Validate what they're saying, so that it is a good interaction. And like just take a minute to hear what they say before reacting.
Yeah.
And so usually if you set it up, it goes pretty well.
I like that. You take a little time to set it up before, and the role play, always a little scary, but it definitely helps. I find myself, I think we all probably do this, doing role plays in my head before I go do something that might be important. Even today, planning on meeting with you, kind of like, role playing. What sort of questions or conversation points should me and Lynny hit on, sort of thing, and it's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did that
you
too.
You do that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. We're on the same page. I think everybody probably does it to some extent. We all have that little inner dialogue of what life's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Any insight on yourself on like what led you to want to be a social worker, a therapist, want to be in the helping profession?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was definitely my family. I have a really big family with a lot of different disorders. We're a little dysfunctional, but there's a lot of love there. And so growing up, I think, a huge piece of it was my family and wanting to help others. A lot of stuff happened to my mom growing up, and I think I wanted to help people that had been through some stuff that she'd been through, kind of like decrease kind of the hard things that happen to people, or help people heal from the hard things. And so just watching, parents and family go through that and wanting to help them.
Did you happen to be the middle child that would have to be in the middle of everything?
No, I was actually the baby. So I was the spoiled one, I guess.
Okay. As the baby of the family, was that dynamic like you're able to observe everything as the youngest one and then want to kind of step in and help a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the choices that each one of my siblings made, and decided that, I didn't want to make some of those choices based on how it hurt them or how it hurt my parents. So I kind of chose the latter. So I definitely learned from watching and observing and being aware.
And growing up, you grew up here in Utah, in Salt Lake. Growing up as a part of the community in Salt Lake, was that affecting all these dynamics as well? The choice to go into social work and helping, and sort of the family dynamic stuff as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How so? Like, what part of the community things sticks out to you? Is it neighborhood, friends, family, religion? What parts stick out for you?
Well, so I'm from a blended family. Okay. So my mom was married before my dad and had 2 kids, and then me and my sister came along. And so I think because of some of that blended family, I don't know if dysfunction is the best word, but just kind of trying to figure out how to navigate that whole thing. I think my family was always kind of worried a little bit about, because we grew up in the Mormon church, and it kind of felt like we were worried about like the outside looking in and trying to look like this perfect little family when it was like, how do we function together?
Sure.
So
I don't think we're allowed to say Mormon church anymore.
Sorry.
I'm giving you a hard time. It's been a big shift within the church of like, we can't use the word Mormon anymore. We don't want to call ourselves Mormon, which I'm sure you're already aware that there's been ups and downs about that in the history of the church of like, okay, no, it's cool. We're Mormons. Let's call ourselves Mormons. The hashtag I am a Mormon sort of thing. But now it's like, no, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
So I also grew up Mormon, so I kind of have some insight about what that's like, what that is like to like kind of appear to your neighbors of like, we're good, everything's cool, even though it might not be. I would attach that to a function of being Mormon rather than, more than, I don't know, maybe other people still experience that of trying to look like the normal family on the street, but I connect that to being Mormon and the culture of being Mormon. Do you make that connection at all? Yeah,
absolutely. I think you worry a lot about what other people think, because it kind of felt like within the church, you try to be like Jesus and you try to be perfect and you want to be seen as that's what you're trying to do, and not like that's a bad thing. But as human beings, we fall short quite a bit.
Yeah, all the time, every single day. So was that a conscious thing spoken about in your family of like, we're Mormon, so we need to, like, when we go out and meet with everybody or go to church, let's not bring our stuff with us, let's leave it here at the house sort of thing? Or was it more of a subconscious, like, we all know that because we're Mormon, we want to put on a good face for everybody?
It was definitely, we didn't talk about it. Okay. I think it was just what you did. It was just what everybody did, it seemed like.
I'm curious though, and this is where I kind of get into maybe the weeds a little bit of like how we all develop these perceptions, but I want to know your insight. Like, how did that perception develop for you as a child? That like, you're obviously very aware that we still want to come across as like a normal family, even though we have dysfunctions. How did that develop within you?
Well, so I took it super serious when growing up, when they said, try to be like Jesus. There's the whole song, I'm trying to be like Jesus. That was my favorite song. and this is something that I created within myself, definitely. And I don't know, like, whether it was like, there was the church, but there was also like the way that I interpreted it. And it was like, I really tried to be like Jesus, and if I wasn't perfect, then I was bad. Like, I was a bad kid. And so obviously I wasn't perfect, and I couldn't be because I'm human.
Sure.
So I, did a lot of shaming towards myself for that, because I continued to mess up.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight on a young child's shoulders, to like this weight of perfection, this weight I need to be like Jesus. And you said you kind of put that on yourself, but obviously that was the messaging you were feeling from maybe the church at that time? Mm-hmm. Family too, or mostly just church?
I think mostly just church. I mean, I think my mom would always say, Heavenly Father, like, knew I couldn't handle another Tiffany, because that's my older sister. She was like a tough kid, and I was always like, just my temperament was always like, I guess, type B, just very chill.
Okay.
And so like she was the one in the restaurant that was like throwing things and screaming and crying and having a tantrum, and I was just sitting there like, can I have some more scones or something?
Yeah.
And my mom didn't mean to put that on me or anything. She's a sweetheart, but I think I took it real like, oh, well, I'm this blessing in my family, and so I need to be the good kid, and I gotta make sure that I'm not hurting my parents or doing things I shouldn't.
That's quite the insight for a child as well, to like be able to see all these dynamics happening, recognize that I'd probably be doing my parents a favor if I was less of a shit. Sorry, Tiffany.
Bless you.
But yeah, like I think I feel that in some respects as well. I think I just have two sisters, and they were both good kids. I think for the most part we were all good kids, but I noticed these perceptions happening too, like, okay, well, I gotta step up my game because of the Jesus factor and the Mormon factor, but also like I want people to see me as like a good kid, a good person too. That's what Mormonism's all about, is creating great kids, right? So with this sort of pressure, you mentioned shame. Shame's a big, heavy word, and it sounds like you noticed it from a young age. The shame would come in when you make mistakes, or when things wouldn't go as planned, or what was that shame like for you?
Well, so I was very I believed it like wholehearted, and so if I broke one of the commandments, or like the law of chastity, or which that was the one I struggled most with, I'll be honest, the boys. And so I had boyfriends, and one of the things in the church is like, you don't have sex till you're married, and so I was trying really hard not to do that, but I was like doing other things with them. And so I'd always go to the bishop, and I was repenting a lot, but I wouldn't go to like baptisms for the dead because I felt like I wasn't worthy, because I couldn't not make out with my boyfriend. So that was a lot of stuff that was going on for me. And so I always felt like, instead of feeling like, where you look at shame and guilt, like shame is like, I am a bad kid, versus guilt, I did a bad thing. Like I definitely thought that I was a sinner.
Right.
Yeah.
Did the church help or hinder that narrative at all? Like, did they help and be like, no, you don't need to feel shame about this? Or do you feel like that there was more shame introduced by the way that the church would talk about things like this?
I mean, both, I guess. I would, obviously feel bad, and then you would go and you would repent, and then you would feel better. And then you would, feel like you were back on track, or forgiven, but then it was just a matter of time.
Yeah. Like,
for me.
Like that primary song about, rain, how we like feel so clean after that rain, or what. I can't remember how it goes, but yeah, like, okay, I've taken the sacrament.
Yeah, and there was like, you can't take the sacrament, and which is shaming, and you
public
shouldn't.
Shaming.
Yeah, and there was a time where they did. I mean, this was later in life when I got put on probation, and they were like, you can't pray in front of people. So things like I mean, that's definitely a rough one, because praying is between you and God. And so if someone were to ask me to pray, I'd have to say, oh, I can't, because I'm in this repentance process. So it's very shaming in front of other people.
Yeah, God might he thinks that you're probably going to say something really weird in that prayer. So we wouldn't want you to do that in front of other people because you've sinned. And that means that when you sin and you try to say a genuine prayer, it doesn't really work out. So please don't pray.
Yeah.
What is the logic behind some of this? It does not make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I imagine that those sort of things, and again, I can kind of connect my own experience, that like it was such a challenge because being just a young person, a teenager going through junior high and high school is already so challenging as it is. And then to take on these extra shame, I need to be like Jesus, I need to be perfect sort of things, it's just begins to get really overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Did it create for you like it sounds like it may have created like a more intense drive, like I can do this, I can be like Jesus, I'm just gonna keep going. It's a grind, but I'm gonna do it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very competitive person, grew up playing sports. I was like, I will like conquer this, I will do this. It definitely was something that was the goal. I was really trying to get there.
What would that look like on like a day-to-day basis for you in terms of like the grind, the conquer, I'm going to do this?
I would read my scriptures and pray morning and night. I tried not to go to rated R shows. I tried not to swear. But it's interesting because the majority of my friends weren't religious. So my best friend wasn't Mormon and my boyfriend wasn't Mormon. So I surrounded myself with people that weren't Mormon, and I never ever judged them for the things that they were doing. I always just held myself to a different standard. Like they could be off partying or doing whatever, and I never was like, oh, it's bad. But for me, it was, so I held myself into a different category.
Was that hard to like resist that, or it almost sounds like it was like an easy thing, like, oh, it's all right if they want to go do these sort of things, but I'm over here and I'm doing my thing?
Yeah, no, it wasn't ever really hard. I was just kind of, it was what it was. Like I was never super tempted to do a lot of things like party or anything like that, or yeah. And just going back, I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but just going back to one of the big things I like about you is your lack of judgment. You like I think that sounds like it's been around for your whole life. You just don't judge people and you just go with it. I love that. Mm-hmm. So getting back into like growing up Mormon, being super strict with yourself, where did that lead you? I mean, I think I know a little bit. It eventually led to a mission, being a missionary. Do you want to talk about that, or is there anything else like in that childhood area of your life that comes up when you think about growing up Mormon? Yeah, absolutely. I think going to the bishop's office, like now that I'm a trained professional, a therapist, and I went to 8 years of school, and thinking back on how you just go talk to a man in the neighborhood about your problems that has no training. Right. And I had great bishops that were loving and kind, and some that were not so great. And just trusting to have your child go to this random person to talk about their problems and their, sexuality. I think as parents and being a therapist, it's super important that we're talking to our kids about that, rather than just like, oh, this guy will take care of it. Yeah. And trusting that. I would never let my teenage daughter go to a male in the neighborhood and talk about her sexuality. Yeah. And I love my parents. They were doing the best that they could. That's just kind of what you did, you know? And so I think, there were some that wanted details, there were some that didn't. And it's just a really awkward thing to talk to a man that's like your neighbor about really intimate stuff. Right. And I think really they should have therapists like within, and I know that they have therapists within the church, but I think a lot of that should be kind of their realm in a sense. Right. Because they don't really have any training. So it's just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I've spent some time thinking about this. Being a male, I don't think I've experienced this near to the levels that some females have experienced, of having to talk to this strange old man in the neighborhood sort of thing like you described is extra weird. I agree with you. If I have daughters, I would never want them to have to go through that, and also agree that, parents, we need to do better jobs of just talking to our kids about these things rather than expecting that, like, okay, it's a good thing we got a bishop because I can just let Sally go and talk to Bishop about all these things and I don't have to deal with it. I think that sometimes is a mentality that creeps into all of this. But when I think more deeply about what this is all about for the church, I'm not sure I have great answers, but I think some of it comes back to this power structure of like making young kids report to an older male figure in a way that, like, it's sort of like, okay, I gotta report on myself again because I screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think going to that parent piece, it would have been so nice growing up if my parents could say, like, it's okay to make mistakes. And, like, obviously you have a boyfriend. Like, that's been your boyfriend for 6 years, 3 years, whatever. Let's sit down and talk about it. And, like, it's okay. You're figuring this stuff out, biologically. You're made to, produce. And so you're attracted. Like, these feelings are okay. And this is okay. And, like, I think parents need to just sit down and have those conversations and let them know that they get to make those choices and that's okay,
Let's pretend for 1 second that we can influence the church's decision on how they do things in the future. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give about this particular practice?
Well, I definitely think parents should be sitting down with their kids more and talking about their lives. And I remember my mom gave me this book, Soul Symbols and Sacraments, because I think she knew. And it pretty much said, if you have sex, then it's playing God because you could have a child, and it's God's timing of when we're here.
Right.
And
right.
So I think just sitting down and just not giving them a book, not sending them to the bishop, and just being like, okay, what's really going on? I love you no matter what. No matter what choice you're making, whether you're worthy from the church standards or not, like, I love you, you have worth. Tell me what's going on. Let's work through it.
Yeah.
So I think parents need to just step in.
So I think that's great from the parents' perspective. What about from like a church structure perspective? Is this just like a church, you need to scrap this, do away with this whole practice of having to have youth confess their sins?
Well, that's a heavy one. Yeah, actually, I think you should be able just to pray and repent and have a therapist there that they can go talk to rather than, they can have a bishop, but I would prefer that they went to a trained professional,
right,
especially with like the suicide rate going on, to talk to about their problems.
Yeah.
I think it's more shaming to have to go to a bishop.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that you mentioned kind of the suicide rate, because this is all, of course, tied into mental health. A lot of the things that a young person might feel like they need to talk to a bishop about or talk to a religious leader about probably is tied into mental health things going on for the youth. Not saying that everybody that makes a mistake has these intense mental health problems, but it's often, as a teenager, you're developing, figuring out who you are, you're struggling with self-esteem, confidence, and then when you have to go talk about mistakes to an older person that you don't really know or trust, a lot gets wrapped up into mental health. Mm-hmm.
And then even just looking at the LGBTQ community and kids within the church and telling their bishop and the bishop not quite knowing how to handle that and just like, well, pray to be different, where it's like...
Doubt your doubts.
Yeah. So having a trained professional in there can really help them navigate that, and rather than just, stuff it under the rug.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure we could explore hours and hours on this. My personal perspective is that if you bring in a trained professional, even if they're a trained therapist, but are still kind of subscribing to the structure of the church, it gets challenging, because I think some of those therapy sessions do get into like, well, part of your therapy is that you need to repent, or part of your therapy is that you need to read your scriptures, sort of thing. I can see some of the benefit of that, because if this person does believe and it's all tied in together, great. But at the same time, I think it sort of continues to just pound home some of that shame that goes along with all of it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I didn't think about that, because I think I thought in my head, like, me going in there as a therapist. Sure. And I work with Mormon kids and non-Mormon together, and I have kids that are preparing for mission, and it's just about, we don't really talk about religion, but I support them wholeheartedly with whatever makes them happy. It's kind of, therapy is like figuring out your purpose and falling in love with yourself and figuring out what makes you happy. And if that makes that kid happy, absolutely, I support your happiness. Like, we want to get you in a mentally healthy place.
That's a good therapist right there.
So whatever, because who am I to say what makes them happy? Yeah. Maybe the church does, and that's their thing, and good for them. So I guess in my mind, I was like, well, if someone like me came in and was like, okay, you go do this, and then you have, someone that's struggling with homosexuality, then supporting that, and like, you be you and you be real, and you're still loved. And so I guess I wouldn't fall into the I guess. So yeah, you make a good point, because I would be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's.
Which, in one hand, that might be like a good thing for the church to consider, is having people that are not bought into the church model come in and do therapy with kids that need it. And I don't think they would ever do that, but you can see like somebody neutral coming in and just hearing what's going on for the child or the youth or even the adults, knowing that this person is not going to pass judgment on them or have to think about like, well, it's time for a disciplinary council, time for probation. Let's tell Lynny she can't pray no more. Yeah, that sort of stuff. And just, I don't know, separating that and helping somebody heal seems more important than trying to pound in this accountability piece. Let's provide some shame by getting them on a disciplinary council and just create this thing that's worse than probably whatever they came in for. Yeah. So going back to your story, having some experiences working with bishops and ups and downs of that, what else? What's next?
Well, I kind of went backwards. We were talking about me going on a mission. So I guess we can, as far as like growing up, well, actually, come to think of it, my parents were gone a lot.
Okay.
My dad was a bishop, and my mom was a young woman's. And so I remember a lot of days where I was just kind of home.
Right.
And they were gone. Yeah. And I think, being a therapist, and I work with these families, and we talk about being engaged and being present and quality time with your kids. And I think the church has done better with that. I don't think it's as intense as when we grew up, but I definitely was missing that connection a lot with my parents being gone so much.
Yeah. You shouldn't worry about that, Lynny, because everybody's going to get blessings in heaven for that sort of stuff, and it's going to be fine. Sorry, I get sarcastic sort of comments in these, but yeah, I've recognized that as well. Like, the higher levels in the church require so much time, and they're a preaching family, but then you're gone from family so much if you're a bishop, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember that being a little tough as well. I'm trying to think of some other things. Yeah. But yeah, going on to the mission.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it. I love to hear about people's missions, actually.
So I went to Tampa, Florida, and I worked with the Hispanic population, so I learned Spanish, which I am super grateful for. I could have never done on my own or have the motivation to do that. And I mean, it's still one of the best things I've ever done. I don't have any, regrets as far as going on a mission.
Right.
It taught me how to be alone without my family. Now they get to talk to their kids, but
yeah.
I only talked to them like 3 times, and so you have to learn to be happy by yourself, and then so many life skills.
Yeah.
And being the baby, I missed, my siblings took very good care of me. I knew, with my sister, if I waited long enough, that she would clean our room. And, I even got one of my sisters at one point to brush my teeth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was
wow, you know how to work it.
I knew how to work it. They'd call the pizza guy for me. So then I go on this mission, and it's like, okay, now I have to iron, and I burned a bunch of clothes, and I learned how to, iron and do laundry. And so just being an adult, it taught me how to be a successful adult.
Yeah.
And all those things that my family did was because they love and care about me, and, bless their hearts. But yeah, so I was definitely humbled going on a mission. I worked in a lot of low-income areas, and we did a lot of service, and I helped people become citizens. So really, I did a lot of social work is what I did. I was a social worker.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of what being a missionary is about, is doing the very basics for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being I was not really there, I didn't really believe in things, to 10, I'm with it. I believe in this. I'm going to get this message to as many people as I can. Where were you as a missionary?
I was 10. I went on a mission because religion made me so happy, and I, wanted to share that with people. I wanted to give them what I had, this happiness that I felt, and teach them about Jesus. And, so it was motivated by trying to help other people.
Okay.
So I was in it. I think the only thing I did wrong, I was very obedient. I didn't want to wear nylons to the grocery store, but my trainer made me. But I was a little defiant about that, because those things were the worst, the knee highs.
Oh, I'm sure.
They were
so
sexy. So I didn't want to do that, but then I got used to it. And then there was a couple of times I did call my mom that I was just really struggling, and then she would call my mission president and tell him that I called, and so then he'd be like, why aren't you talking to me? Because my mom felt guilty. So I think I called her twice, but other than that, I was obedient. I was in it.
You believed in it. You thought you were going to bring peace, love, and happiness to everybody that heard your message.
Absolutely.
You mentioned happiness before, wanting to bring happiness to people's lives because you had felt that happiness. As you look back, I know retrospectively things change, but as you look back, talk about that happiness. What do you mean when you said you had that happiness?
I think I had a purpose.
Okay.
There was, I think a lot of times teenagers really struggle with purpose and what am I here for? And I feel so alone. And I didn't have that because I could pray, and there was someone there that was listening and that was helping me along the way. And my purpose was to bring, be the shepherd and bring everyone into the fold.
Right.
So that's what made me happy. And yeah.
I want to rewind a little bit because you're of the age where I believe you weren't allowed to go until you're 21.
Yes.
But also of the age where we're kind of in this weird cultural era where it's kind of the women going on missions, and forgive me for saying this if this is offensive, but the women going on missions, it just kind of meant that you weren't married yet, so like next best thing you can do is, now that you're 21, is to go on a mission. Do you feel that, or is that my sort of male growing up Mormon perception?
No, this is funny, and I probably shouldn't share it, but I'm going to. So when I sat my parents down to tell them I was going to go on a mission, and they thought I was going to tell them I was going to get married to this boy that I'd been with forever. So they're gearing up to be like, okay, she's getting married. And I said, I'm going on a mission. And my dad's response was, only ugly fat girls go on a mission. Oh, no. Yeah, terrible. Yes, I said it. And so that was kind of like where my dad's brain was like, you don't need to go on a mission. You can get married. You have a boyfriend, just get married. Like, he said that to me over and over all the way up. Just get married. Just marry him. Like, you don't need to go.
Right.
Yeah, so that definitely is a thing.
Do you, and was Dad saying this? I don't know if you talked to him since about that, just because of those perceptions in the church, or like he just felt like his daughter would be, the next best thing would be marriage, not a mission? Oh,
probably the next best thing would be a marriage, so that I had a man that took care of me, and he wouldn't have to worry about me. Oh, okay. And then on a mission, he'd have to worry every second, and he's a worrier.
I guess that's true. I didn't think about those aspects of a parent sending their child away for, I guess for you, 18 months or 2 years or whatever. That is kind of weird, I'm sure. Yeah. Go to this weird place, Florida, Mm-hmm. Is Florida as weird as people say it is?
Yeah, it is. There's some weird bugs there. Yeah. Huge ones.
And weird people, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, it is a whole nother... I didn't feel like I was in the States.
Oh, interesting.
That makes sense, yeah.
So you're out there on a mission, you're doing your thing, you're trying to help people, serve people, teach them about Jesus and Joseph Smith and all of that. What thoughts, memories come when you think about that time of your life?
Just really sweaty because it was Florida. I was miserable. I'm a sweaty human being. I don't know. I had a great time. I really loved the people, and I think serving them and helping them, and I had so much love. And it was so nice because the one thing about a mission is you don't have to do anything around yourself. It's all for other people. So you wake up and you prepare to help people, and then you go through your day and you help people, and if they're poor, we'd go get blankets, or if they had an apartment, there was like 10 of them in a 2-bedroom apartment, we'd go get bunk beds, and so it was so fulfilling helping others, and so I enjoyed a lot of that, the pieces of that.
Yeah, I think I would say the same, like just this opportunity to be somewhere different, experience something different, and then to always be with this sort of mindset of, I can help somebody today, how can I help somebody today? And even though it came from maybe, I don't know, maybe I should just speak for myself on this, but it came from a perspective of like, okay, if I help and serve other people, then maybe they're going to want to join the church, and that's going to be the ultimate reward for me and for the church is when somebody joins. I don't know, did you have thoughts like that?
No. Okay. I wasn't very good at, so I was just like the lover of the people, and then my mission president would continue to put me with this sister missionary that was like the committer, like, will you get baptized on this day and at this time, like the type A. Okay. And that was just like, I didn't do that stuff. Right. I was just like, come to church and sit by me and let's hug each other. And, I wasn't very good at getting them in the water. So he put me with her like 3 times, and she would just get everyone I'd been working with for 6 months baptized. So a lot of them got baptized, but I was never a pusher. So for me, it was all about just like helping and serving and like getting to know them and being a part of their life and their culture and just loving them. So yeah, I wasn't ever really about like numbers And so
getting them in the water.
Yeah.
I like how you said that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we use that terminology. I'm sure we did. Getting them in the water.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed recently from your social media is that I think you recently posted about your mission president.
Mm-hmm.
Mission president is this guy, has to be male again, one of these male patriarchal things in the church that oversees all the missionaries for that area. Seems like you really got along with him, kind of a father figure a little bit maybe, and really enjoyed that relationship with him. Was that a good sort of maybe other side of the spectrum in terms of dealing with a man in the church and having to have a relationship and report to him and all of that?
I never felt like that. He was this big, funny, silly guy that was very fun-loving. He was a chief of police for Boston, and so when he was coming over, I was already on my mission. I was like, we're not getting along. Like, he's a policeman. And I had been I got in trouble growing up as a kid because I hang out with boys, and so I had had some run-ins with the cops, and so I didn't really like cops so much at that point, and so I was like, there is no way. But he showed up, and he was silly, and we would laugh together, and he was like just so loving, and he was just kind of this badass that had been shot. And like, I thought that was the coolest thing. Because he was tough, and I like to be tough. But just when I would screw up or like tell him things, he was always so like safe, and like I could never do anything wrong in his eyes. And so for me, it was really healing to have him in my life. Because my dad was a little different than that. Okay. So he was a Vietnam vet. Stressed out all the time. We didn't have that kind of relationship.
Sounds empowering, like healing and empowering. Like, you can go do this, go out there, do it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he totally like empowered me to be better in every aspect of my life. Yeah, and I don't know if he was really about the numbers either. I think he got in trouble a couple of times.
I was going to say, the church probably didn't like that.
Yeah,
they
he
usually
would say
the numbers
they
guys.
would call the big guys would call him and be like, you need to increase your numbers.
What do you mean? Yeah. I was fortunate to have a little bit more of a liberal mission president myself that was, I mean, we talked about numbers and stuff, but he was liberal in the way he dealt with us as missionaries, and liberal with the way he viewed kind of our interaction with people we would talk to. And so I think if I didn't have that as a missionary, I would have really hated my time as a missionary. But I really enjoyed it because it felt more genuine, felt more laid back, and felt like we could just take some time to connect with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he made it so great.
So I don't know if now's the time to skip ahead to, like, people have probably caught on to reveal that you no longer participate in church or identify as Mormon, probably. You want to skip ahead and talk about that, or any other thoughts between like the mission time and this time where you were starting to transition, some thoughts or faith or things like that?
No, we can skip ahead. I can't think of anything.
I'm just, because I get fascinated by this sort of stuff, having gone through it myself of transitioning faith. I wonder about what goes into it for everybody else that has experienced it. So you have this, sounds like an overall great experience as a missionary. You probably, and of course jump in and add your own words, but come home with like, okay, this is it. I'm Mormon for life, sort of thing. It's time to start a Mormon family.
Well, and speaking of my mission president, when we were sitting in like the goodbye session that they do, I don't remember what it's called.
An exit interview.
Yes. I mean, he said to me, he's like, I'm not going to tell you that you have to get married in a year because I know you're not going to listen to me. He's like, so you do you. So he was that kind of mission president.
That's refreshing.
He was great. because he knew that wasn't going to be a thing for me. So I came home, and but I was definitely I was in it. And I think I had a little bit of trauma, like adjusting back to real life.
Sure.
Back to like, okay, now you do everything for yourself. Like school is for you, and you're not helping these people every single day. And that was a little bit of like a big transition. But I got my bachelor's degree, and then I dated.
University of Utah?
Yeah, I dated some people in between there. And then I did get married in the temple, and then I became a seminary teacher.
Oh, wow. You really are going for it.
Yeah, so talk about competitive. Trying to be perfect.
You're reaching celestial levels on all levels. Yeah.
And so then I got divorced, and I had told one of the seminary teachers that I was working with that I was getting divorced, and 2 days later they came in and sat me down and told me, they fired me essentially in a nice way, but said, you can't be a seminary teacher and be divorced. And that has changed now, but back then that was what it was. And I was like, well, it's not like I want to get up and tell these kids, hey, I'm divorced, like, don't get married in the temple, like, this is the worst thing happening. Like, this is not what I want to be happening to me in my life. But they told me to pack my things and go, and so I did. So it was like within the matter of a week, I lost a job, I lost a husband and an entire family and a house, and it was definitely like I was in the storm. I was in rock bottom. But once again, like, the siblings came and rescued me and got me a place. And
was this here in Utah?
Yeah, this was in Utah. And so it was kind of at that time where I got pretty angry at the church. I was getting therapy. They took therapy away. And I just felt like at that moment, because I was doing like LDS family services, when I needed the church the most, they weren't there for me. And I don't have any anger anymore, but back then I had a lot of anger. I was really mad.
Yeah. Well, rightfully so. Like, for like, I don't know what their thinking was behind firing somebody if they're not married to be a seminary teacher. Just stupid to me.
Yeah, essentially, you're a bad example because they don't like divorce.
Yeah.
But that's like, they're super high in the religion, divorce. But so that kind of is what happened. And it was interesting because I had evaluations earlier, like a couple weeks earlier, from all the kids, and I didn't get any negative evaluations as a seminary teacher. And it was the first time ever that ever happened, and they still fired me. So I'm like, well, okay. And then I would even have seminary teachers be like, how'd you not get any like negative evaluations from the kids? I'm like, I don't, like, they wanted me to like help them be better seminary teachers.
Right.
But they still let me go.
The irony is so rich, right? Like, Lynny, Sister Anderson, was a great seminary teacher. The kids really liked her. Kids gave her great reviews. For, the marriage thing didn't work out, and it was better for Lynny to get out of it, but we're going to fire her anyway.
Makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happened. And at that time, I was kind of questioning things too. Like, there was stuff going on outside of that world. In school, I remember there was a religious panel that came in, and the social work program was in this big auditorium, and we could ask them questions. And there was like Methodist, Baptist, whatever you can think of, Mormon, just all the religions. And so the people would ask questions, and they would get up and give their answer. And I remember sitting there, and every time like the church that I was a part of would answer, I was like, yeah, I don't believe that. Like, I'm not okay with that. And it was a lot about like the LGBTQ community, and like, equal rights and abortion, like all these things. I'm just like, wait a second, like I'm a part of this thing, but I'm not on board with most of their like beliefs or what they're doing. And so it was kind of that reflection moment of, why am I co-signing on this organization when I don't believe any of that or think any of that's okay?
Right.
So that was big for me too.
Was that like an uh-oh moment? Like, uh-oh, this is starting to crumble a little bit for me and it's all kind of coming apart. But at the same time, maybe not wanting to acknowledge that, because acknowledging it means that life is probably going to change quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was the uh-oh, and it was a little scary, and yeah, it was hard to kind of navigate everything, because that was my identity, right? I was Mormon until I was 27. And so what was that going to look like for me to leave the church? And there was confusing aspects, because I bought in, and I still buy into these things, like the golden rule, like treat other people as you want to be treated, and put yourself in other people's shoes, and love thy neighbor as thyself, like all these things that are, great teachings. But I'm like, well, but you're not doing that. You're just saying, okay, you're not okay with LGBTQ, but you're not putting yourself in their shoes to understand where they're coming from, and you're saying they can't have these things that other people can have, and how is that treating them as you want to be treated, and how is that loving your neighbor? And so I was like going through this whole well, this is confusing.
Yeah. That's a great way to just simply put it. It is confusing, because it is hypocritical, right? Like, do all these things, but wait a second, on these certain things, don't take that rule into account, sort of thing. We're not going to treat you the same because of this or that. It's very weird. Was this a bachelor in social work program?
Yes, this was so it was, actually, it might have been, no, because when I met you, I wasn't in the church in my master's, right? Yeah, so it must have been bachelor's. I'm just curious if the social work program in general, obviously that event where you're asking these religious leaders or whatever these questions, brought up a lot of questions, but was the social work program in general a point where a lot of these things began to be challenged for you? Yes, absolutely. Definitely getting more of an education, and definitely I started thinking deeper, and so it was, the social work was huge. It was a huge factor in all of it. And then the divorce and getting fired just pushed me over the edge. It was like the last thing that I just needed, something that was gonna make me leave, and that was it.
And from that day, was that it? We're like, I'm out, or was it a slow burn?
It was a little bit of like a slow burn. I think I kind of tried to go here and there, but was still pretty angry. And then that's when they put me on probation, because I kind of, to deal with, because divorce is like, when you look at the traumas that we go through in our life, it's like the second highest, and I was doing a lot of unhealthy things to numb the pain and to feel happy, because I was depressed and sad, and my whole world had crumbled, and so I wasn't like living the standards of the church, and so they'd put me on probation and told me that I couldn't pray and all, and then finally it's just like, I'm not doing this anymore. So yeah. Like, I would show up to primary to teach primary like hungover. So I was like, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is a little, If
teaching primary couldn't get any more painful, you go hungover.
Yeah. This is not working for me.
Yeah. And just to go back, just to talk about probation, for those that don't know what that means, there's this disciplinary council or disciplinary measures in the church where if you do certain levels of sin, then you get on probation that could eventually lead to you being disfellowshipped or even excommunicated from the church. So it's this weird sort of structure where like we have these different levels of sin, and if you do certain levels, you get bought into this probationary period where you can't do certain things in the church, like pray or maybe interact in the church in a certain way. I imagine that goes back and contributes to a lot of the shame stuff you talked about earlier from your teenage years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So slowly you're kind of like, okay, I'm out, I'm done with this. What does life on the other side look like from there?
It's pretty good. Yeah, I think I went to a lot of therapy because I think there's a lot of spiritual abuse is kind of what my therapist would call it. Just kind of getting over like the shame and releasing that I didn't have to be perfect and that it was okay. And so I worked on a lot of that. It just felt like I could breathe better. You know, it was just like huge lift, like a lot of it was lifted off of my shoulders, not being in the church. And also, I enjoy fighting for equal rights and the things that I believe in and advocating for them. Yeah.
So when you say fight for equal rights, you're saying like fight against the church to try to give people equal rights, or just in general?
Just in general. Okay. Yeah, not necessarily against the church, but I do think they should have the same rights as everyone else. And so whether I'm marching in a protest up at the Capitol, you know, I'll do that. And the, you know, clients that I see, I'll definitely give them the resources and help them, you know, find their way, things like that.
For me, when I decided that I wasn't going to do the church thing anymore, that transition on one hand was like super simple. It was like you described, a weight off my shoulders. Now I can just feel like I can be me more. I don't have to worry about this. What are other people thinking? Am I doing all that I can to be like Jesus or whatever? But on the other hand, it's kind of complicated because you're learning to do life in a whole new way. Did you experience that, and talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think I remember my mom growing up, we would watch movies, you know, and they would like go to the bar and have a one night stand, and my mom would be like, this is pretend. Like, that's not real. It doesn't really happen. And, you know, you grow up really naive and very sheltered in Utah.
Right.
And so then I got out into the real world, and I'm like, Mom, this absolutely does happen. People do this all the time. And so just kind of seeing the world for, like, not in those naive eyes and what's really going on was a change. Yeah, and I think I still... Well, for a long time there, I would catch myself, I guess you'd call it like brainwashed in a sense. Like, if I would drink or whatever, I would feel bad or, you know, just go against some of their beliefs. I'd have to continue to reframe my brain. I think I did a lot of reframing for probably like 2 years. Like, I'm not a bad person. Like, I'm a good person.
Reminding
like,
yourself,
just because I drink, like, here's proof that, you know, I'm a good person because I do this, and I help people all day, and like trying to convince myself, you know. Yeah,
I think I've experienced some of that too. Was a lot of that work that you did to overcome that, like therapeutic, working with a therapist? Or what other stuff did you do to help you through that transition period?
I'm trying to think. What else did I do? Yeah, I think I just went to really intense therapy for 2 years.
Which is great. I think that's great that
for
you
two
were...
2 hours a week, I went for 2 years and really kind of hashed it all out and, you know, did all those things where you release any and all of it, you know, whether it's like writing on a piece of paper and burning it or, things like that.
Yeah. Some symbolic stuff to help you to get through that.
Yeah, I even like wrote a letter to God a couple times, because I had to work through a lot of that anger and kind of realize that it wasn't so much like, because it was 27 years of my life that I, tried to keep the commandments and devoted to him. And I think it was this moment of like you said if I kept the commandments, then my life would be great. And then I got divorced and my world crumbled.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of mad about that, like, because I felt like I'd given so much. And so I had to work through that process. And so then just kind of realize it's an organization. And it's not necessarily like God or the higher power or the universe or anything like that. It's just kind of the man-made piece of everything.
Was that a big mental shift for you to like be able to now shift away and be like, okay, perhaps God, if there's a God, is not in charge of this. This is just an organization, and this is how they organize their people to think and do what they would like them to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was on my mission, I'd track into people that were, Catholic, and they had this really religious experience with God, like, and I, that was never like, it wasn't like a Mormon God versus like Catholic God for me. I was like, oh, that's like, I could kind of navigate that he's the God of everyone, he's taking care of everyone. But it was weird because within that transition, I had to kind of figure out, well, I guess you have to figure out what your own beliefs are and where God fits in, because you only know the Mormon God that you grew up with. And so figuring out, because I still have experiences where I feel like there's a higher power involved and, taking care of me. And I can't deny that I feel like there's something bigger out there. So, but just kind of like, yeah, it is a weird transition to separate it, I guess.
I'm interested to hear, going back to like using therapy as the tool to help you to get through the transition. It seems like it was an easy choice for you to like do therapy and go to therapy. I think maybe it wasn't. I don't know. You can talk about that, but my perception is that a lot of people are really resistant to go to therapy for one reason or another. Maybe now, and we're talking, 10 or 15 years later from the area of your life you're talking about, now people are maybe a little bit more open to do it. So why was it so easy, or was it easy to just make that decision to do therapy? No, it wasn't easy. Okay.
It took me 6 years, actually. So 6 years after my divorce, which is, I wish I would have gone sooner, because I feel like I suffered a lot in those 6 years that I didn't need to. But I guess it's the stigma around therapy. I was just kind of surviving within, but I think I got to the point where I was sad enough that I needed to make a change. Like, I got pretty sad. I was like, okay, I couldn't maintain a relationship because of my divorce. Like, I wanted to be able to have a relationship again, and I had like lots of walls up. I wasn't letting people in, and so I finally went.
So if you were to go back and give your younger self advice, it would be to maybe start therapy a little bit sooner to help you avoid some of that suffering that you went through.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And any thoughts or advice you would get if somebody were listening to us talk right now and maybe is going through some sort of faith transition themselves? Any sort of like thoughts or advice that you would give to somebody going through that is brand new for them?
Yeah, I think definitely go talk to a therapist about it, as it's hard to work through. But also just know that you're enough and you have worth, and you don't have to be perfect. And yeah, just kind of release all of that past stuff. Like release anything in your past, the religious stuff, and just start fresh, start new, move forward.
Yeah, let go of all that pressure on the shoulders. Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good advice. So you do the therapy thing, you find a better spot in life, you move on. What's next for Lynny?
Then I got remarried, and I think there was like a moment there where I remember like being with my new husband and laying there and thinking, like thanking God or my higher power for this new person, and that moment of like, I'm so glad I went through all of that, because I'm where I am now. And like is that moment where all of our trials and become positive, and like
yeah. No, that's a big shift.
So it was a shift, and I was like, I did like say I apologized to God and was like, hey, I'm sorry that I was so mad at you because you had this other person for me and this different life. And even now, like sitting in my private practice room, all of these events in my life have like led up to here, and I'm thankful for all of them. And there's been trials upon trials, but they ultimately have got me to this spot in my life. And so I'm thankful for those trials, each and every one of them. But I couldn't always say that. And so that was like a big point for me. That was a big changing moment.
Can you account for this ability to look at trials or difficult parts of life and look at them as learning moments, or looking at them as making you ready for now, the person you are now? Like, how do you account for that?
I mean, it took a while, but I think now anytime there's something hard in my life, I kind of take a step back and say, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And how am I supposed to grow from this? And how can I make this a positive thing in my life? And sometimes it takes years to see why it's a positive thing. And you don't see it. And sometimes it takes longer than that, but just kind of trusting in the process and seeing what you can figure out so you can get through it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, for me, what you just described is as a person that is really working on progressing and improving life versus somebody that feels stuck. I think a lot of people, and I've been there before, where I feel stuck is when I'm only just thinking about all these worst parts of life, not trying to learn from the hard parts or the trials, just like stuck and overthinking things and being like, okay, like you said, let's take a step back, shift my perspective on this and see if I can either move through it or move around it to continue to progress.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you ask me about giving advice for people, leaving the church or just anywhere where you are in life, if you're struggling, like you don't have to be sad all the time. I was sad for like 6 years and I suffered and I didn't need to. And the biggest step to take is just to ask for help. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help. It takes more courage to ask for help than to sit in silence, right? So that you can quit being sad. Like, love yourself enough that you'll quit being sad and take those steps and go to therapy, and doing what it takes to fight for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I could add a couple thoughts into that, and I think you would agree that, like, you don't need to be sad all the time, but it's absolutely okay to be sad.
Absolutely,
it's
yes.
okay to
feel your feelings.
Yeah, feel your feelings. It's okay to grieve your loss if you're, moving past a religion or a relationship or whatever. Grieve, be sad, but yeah, like you said, you don't need to be sad for 6 years in a row. And there's help to be had, and I'm sure plenty of people that are willing to help you. And a therapist is a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you get remarried, you have some realizations. One thing that stood out to me as you talked about this, laying there kind of thanking God or your higher power to get you to this point. That's an interesting thought to me, because I think my experience is that once I've moved past being Mormon, religion in general, I've kind of moved past the idea of God. Mm-hmm. And maybe move past is not the right wording, because I don't want to say that I'm progressing past other people. Maybe just for me, it's just like I don't really have a belief in God. Not sure about a higher power, and I've kind of let go and be like, it doesn't really matter to me. So, mm-hmm. I am now. I'm just am who I am. Can you put some thoughts to like why you retain a higher power belief or retain this relationship with a God or
Yeah, I think when I went through my transition, I was like, I felt like I couldn't believe in God anymore in a sense. And, just kind of working through, I was like, yes, I can. It doesn't have to be this, Mormon God. And I think at the end of the day, I just choose to, because it makes me happy. And okay. I don't know, like, I believe in a higher power. I don't know, because of my upbringing, maybe for me, it's like, I say God or whatever, like maybe it's the universe. I just feel guided by something. And I don't know what that is. But I just decided to choose that. Like that there's something out there taking care of me. And also because of like a lot of things that have happened, and people can call it coincidence. Maybe it is coincidence. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but I don't really have to like worry about if there's a heaven, I'll figure it out. Do I want to believe in heaven? Yeah. Do I choose to believe in heaven? Sure. I have no idea what that looks like, because I want to see my family again. But if I'm dead in the ground, I'm not going to know any different. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I have seen, a God, or that I know these things, because I don't. But just like, I went to Sedona recently with a friend, and she's like a doctor, and we get like these crystals and stuff, and she's like, how do you buy into this? I'm like, she's like, that these rocks are giving you some sort of, energy. Right. And I'm just like, because you just choose to. Just choose it. Just choose that you love these rocks, and they're going to, have this energy. Because, some things we can't prove, but. Yeah.
It makes me think there's this book, and I rarely read all of the books, but I read parts of books. It's called The Biology of Belief, and it talked about how, like, when you start believing in something and really believe in it a lot and dedicate a lot of time to it, our biology shifts, our literal biology, our makeup shifts, and it's like, that's why they called it the biology of belief. So it just kind of speaks to what you said, like, because I believe in it, because I believe in it, it is real to me. It works. I believe that these crystals and rocks are going to help me. That's why it works for me. Which is an interesting thought, right? Because you're going to, of course, apply that to many facets of life if you really sat down and think about it.
Yeah, and I'm okay with people telling me that, that they don't do anything, or it's hokey, or that there isn't a God, because I don't know. And to each his own, whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, I just live each day trying to be a good person, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So I don't put too much weight around it anymore.
So no more pursuit. You're not pursuing, like, figuring out what God is, who God is, what the universe means, existential questions.
No, I don't need any of that. Just, I would say I'm pursuing, trying to help the world and people, and just want to make a difference.
I like that. If anything, I'm pursuing trying to let go more. I think growing up Mormon taught me to grasp really hard, truths, living a certain way, being a certain person, showing up in a certain way. And now I think my pursuit is like, I just need to let go and just be for a little bit, because it feels nice to not have such heavy expectation and such a a trodden path to walk on.
Mm-hmm. And I think I've been out of the church a little bit longer than you. Because I used to try to bring you over to what they said, the dark side.
The dark side.
When we were in our master's degree, I was like, come hang out with me. And, you know. So, yeah, I think I've been away longer than you.
Yeah. Have you found what I described at all, this like just ability to let go and be, and any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just 100% real now. And I think you do have to get to that point where you don't care what other people think, and you'll attract the people that think the same way as you. You might lose some people. Definitely within that transition, I lost people. You know, and that's growth, I guess, as you go different directions. That's going to happen, but just kind of following you.
Yeah.
And what is real to you and what you believe. And then you end up actually gaining even more amazing friends and, you know, blessings or whatever.
Maybe more authentic friends, right? Because they're seeing you for who you are, and you're now in a pursuit to probably see them for who they are as well.
And you don't have to worry about the judgment piece, right? Like, you don't have to present a certain way, or like, oh, I don't do this, and this, because you're worried about what they think. There's no pressure or judgment around who you are as a person, where growing up there was a lot of worry there for me, I think.
Right.
Like, I'm not a good enough Mormon if I go see this rated R show and they're gonna judge me that I'm a bad person, and like all those just like catastrophizing thoughts, like downward spiraling, just didn't need to be there.
Right.
We're there. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Like you said, that weight off the shoulders feels nice.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I talk about with other guests that come on and chat is about Utah and like the Utah experience, what it is to be a Utahn or to come move here and live here, sort of thing. Salt Lake, we all know each other. That sort of perspective of things. You growing up here in Salt Lake, I think you recognize the power and influence the church has over the community, the states, everything that goes on here. So if we were to, again, go back to do some sort of thought experience or role playing, and the church invited us back in and said, all right, what do we need to change here in the church to make things better in the community, in the state? Lynny, go give us advice. So what do you have any thoughts on, have you thought about that? Or because I think, like, just taking some thoughts from your earlier comments of like, you enjoyed your time in the church, you enjoyed being a missionary, you don't necessarily want to talk people out of being Mormon or say that the Mormon church is all bad. We recognize these things that we think that they should change. So we're essentially not saying like, let's get rid of the church, but maybe let's change some things. What, any thoughts?
I think it's one of those things, practice what you preach.
Okay.
Right? So if you're gonna, you know, what I talked about earlier, I think it would be important to accept the LGBTQ community and let them be a part of the church and let them be married and all of those things. And yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things for me. And let's see, what else? Maybe you definitely get some therapy in there instead of the bishop. We talked about that.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean, people often ask me if they were to like accept the LGBTQ community, if I would go back. I don't think I would, but because I like my Sundays in the mountains. I spent a lot of time at my Sundays at church for 3 hours. But I definitely would feel better about it. I would maybe, you know, go on the holidays or something. But yeah, I think just being more accepting, and yeah, it's interesting to me because I try to talk to my parents about this all the time, but when you have like, when you look at brain development and you look at like an ADHD brain and a normal brain, you're going to see, that it's firing in all these different places if it's ADHD, right? And then you look at the normal brain, and it's all kind of in one area. But when you look at, there's a lot of studies with LGBTQ population and their brain versus like the normal brain, and it is firing different. And so how can you just say, these people can't be a part of this? Well, you could potentially say, well, these ADHD people can't be a part of this, or these people with depression, because your brain's different. Yeah. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair.
I think it's a bit ironic that we have to mention just practicing acceptance to the church, because, the church bears the name of this guy, Jesus, and Jesus apparently was this unconditional lover that, come as you are sort of thing. We'll love you and take care of you sort of thing. And now we're coming back full circle and saying like, well, actually the church needs to do a lot better job on this actual acceptance piece. Yeah.
I feel like I have to think about that question. I feel like I could come back in a couple of weeks and tell you a lot more.
I think that's a really good answer. I'm sorry what I just said. I'm not trying to take away from your answer. I'm just saying, like, it's funny though that, acceptance is, it's a very basic thing. Yeah. Just what can the church work on accepting people for who they are a little bit better?
Yeah. And even just choices that you make too, and then just less shaming, like let people make some choices and just love them for it.
Yeah. And I think going back to like the community, Salt Lake, Utah in general, it would be a better place if the church would take the lead in doing that, right? And showing everybody how to do that. Because of course its membership always just like listens to the leadership and what they should do next, and they're actually very obedient to that. So if the leadership comes and practices acceptance better and shows that love a little bit better, I think things would get better.
Yeah, and I think so many people are afraid of change and the unknown, but just gotta embrace it, like I think maybe some pieces of the church are so worried about, well, what would happen if we were to accept all these things, and would it crumble? I think I think there's a fear behind it. I don't know, but
yeah, I'm sure there is. I think the church is kind of thinking at a place of like, we don't want to lose more than we've lost. How do we retain what we have? Sort of these fear-based questions. Yeah. Yeah. So kind of going back to where we started talking about your transition to being a private practice therapist. So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you and talk about mental health options, what would be the best route to do that?
Probably, I have a website. Okay. So it's Lynny'sInnerTherapy.com.
Okay. LYNNY.
Like S, yes.
Therapy. Okay.
Inner
therapy. Okay.
Yeah. So
sorry, I just wanted to spell out your name.
Inner. Yes, thank you. Therapy. But it kind of looks like, when you look at it, it looks like Lynny Sinner Therapy, because it's like. Oh yeah. And I just kind of left it because I think it's funny.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be Lynny's with an S, Inner Therapy. But yeah.
Okay. Go on the
website, and then email me on that, and we'll get you set up to come see me and work through your stuff.
Cool. Any other ways you would want people to get connected with you if it was outside of the therapeutic realms?
I have an Instagram that they can contact me on.
Yeah. You want to share that?
Actually, I don't even.
What is our Instagram handles? Yeah. It's okay. We can add it to the notes for this. We can go back and add it.
That's pretty terrible that I can't.
That's all right.
I know it has on there for Lynny's
that probably just means that you're not obsessed with it and worried about your social media all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you can send to Lynny52, which is just my normal Instagram.
Okay.
But yeah, I should not. But I remember because it's lit and it was used so much, we had to do some tricky, weird underscore things. And so I don't remember. It only started in August, so
it's brand new.
It's brand new.
Just getting started. But yeah, I, of course, like I said at the beginning, I would advocate anybody that's looking for a therapist. Lynny would be a great place to start. Come in. Like she said, she's willing to talk to you about whatever you need help with, and she has a lot of experience, and just as a person, as a human being, she's great. So why would you not, right?
Yeah, come see me.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come in and chat and go over a lot of important things in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. And months or year from now, we'll have to check back in and see how things are going and catch up again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Mm-hmm.